The history of Cuba is characterized by dependence on outside powers: Spain, the US, and the USSR. The island of Cuba was inhabited by various Amerindian cultures prior to the arrival of the Genoese explorer Christopher Columbus in 1492. After his arrival on a Spanish expedition, Spain conquered Cuba and appointed Spanish governors to rule in Havana. Cuba's earliest known human inhabitants colonized the island in the 4th millennium BC. The oldest known Cuban archaeological site, La Visa, dates from approximately 3100 BC. A wider distribution of sites date from after 2000 BC, most notably represented by the Cayo Redondo and the Guayabo Blanco cultures of western Cuba. These Neolithic cultures used ground stone and shell tools and ornaments, including the dagger-like gladiolitus, which are believed to have had a ceremonial role. The Cayo Redondo and Guayabo Blanco cultures lived a subsistence lifestyle based on fishing, hunting, and collecting wild plants. Prior to Columbus's arrival, the indigenous Guana Iatabe, who had inhabited Cuba for centuries, were driven to the far west of the island by the arrival of subsequent waves of migrants, including the Tiano and Siboney. These tribes were part of a cultural group commonly called the Arawak, who inhabited parts of Northeast and South America prior to the arrival of the Europeans. Initially, they settled at the eastern end of Cuba before expanding westward across the island. The Spanish Dominican clergyman and writer Bartolomé de Casas estimated that the Taino population of Cuba had reached 350,000 by the end of the 15th century. The Taino cultivated the yucca root, harvested it and baked it to produce cassava bread. They also grew cotton and tobacco and ate maize and sweet potatoes. According to the history of the Indians, they had everything they needed for living. They had many crops well arranged. So why is it the sudden discovery of remains of what may be a 6,000-year-old city immersed in deep waters off the west coast of Cuba has recently been found? There is, of course, no known history for these structures. The finding itself could force the powers that be to rewrite the entire books of humanity. Paulina Zelitsky and her husband, Paul Weisweg, and their son, Ernesto Tapanes, used sophisticated sonar and videotape devices to find some kind of megaliths you'd find on Stonehenge or Easter Island, they said in an interview. Some structures within the complex may be as long as 400 meters wide and as high as 40 meters. They said some are sitting on top of each other. They show very distinct shapes and symmetrical designs of a non-natural kind. We've shown them to scientists in Cuba, the US, and elsewhere, and nobody has suggested they are natural. Moreover, an anthropologist affiliated with the Cuban Academy of Sciences has said that still photos were taken from the videotape and they clearly show symbols and inscriptions. It is not yet known in what language the inscriptions are written. The sonar images, he added, bear a remarkable resemblance to the pyramidal design of Mayan and Aztec temples in Mexico. He said it was too early to draw firm conclusions from the evidence collected so far. The research team plans for another foray to the site off the peninsula of Cuba's western tip. It hopes to return again, this time with the first deep-water mobile excavator equipped with functions needed for on-site archaeological evaluation, including the ability to blow the sand off the stone. Geologists have recently hypothesized that a land bridge once connected Cuba to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, and portions of the Cuban island are believed to have been submerged in the sea on 3 separate occasions in the distant past. The structures are on a plateau that forms the bottom of what is thought to be a mud volcano, 650 to 700 meters beneath the surface of the ocean and along what is clearly a geological fault line. It's well known that ancient civilizations like to build at the base of volcanoes because the land is fertile, he said. One tantalizing possibility, entirely speculative for now, is that if the legendary sunken continent of Atlantis is ever proven to have existed, these structures may well have been submerged during the same cataclysm. Mr. Weisweg simply says that more information is needed. We prefer to stay away from that subject. This is something of great potential scientific interest, but it must involve serious authorities on ancient civilizations. The precise age of the underwater site is unknown, although Cuban archaeologists in 1966 excavated a land-based megalithic structure on the western coast, close to the new underwater discovery, said to date from 4000 BC. Based on that and other geological information, we're speculating that these are 6,000 years old, he explained. It's not exact, but they're very ancient. If that dating estimate proves accurate, it would mean that an ancient civilization had designed and erected these vast stone structures in the Americas only 500 years after human settlements first became organized in cities and states. They would also have been built long before the wheel was invented in Sumeria, 3500 BC, or the sundial in Egypt, 3000 BC. The three pyramids on Egypt's Giza Plateau are thought to have been constructed between 2900 and 2200 BC. The couple's Havana-based company, Advanced Digital Communications, discovered the site using side-scan sonar equipment to view what resembled an underwater city, complete with roads, buildings, and pyramids. The team returned this past summer with a 1.3-ton unmanned remotely operated vehicle, controlled from the mothership via fiber-optic cable. Its cameras confirmed the earlier findings, showing vast granite-like blocks between 2 and 5 meters in length that were cut in perpendicular and circular designs. But because of technical problems, they said we were only able to survey the perimeter of the site. Based on initial explorations, we think it's much larger than even our sonar projections show. It may extend for several kilometers. In addition to the archaeological site, ADC has been exploring what they call the richest underwater cemetery in the world for sunken Spanish galleons. Hundreds of treasure-bearing ships are said to lie around the island, several hundred to several thousand meters deep. Last year off Havana Bay, it found the remains of a USS battleship. USS Maine was a United States Navy ship that sank in Havana Harbor in February 1898, contributing to the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in April. American newspapers, engaging in yellow journalism to boost circulation, claimed that the Spanish were responsible for the ship's destruction. The phrase, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain," became a rallying cry for action. Although the Maine explosion was not a direct cause, it served as a catalyst that accelerated the events leading up to the war. That incident, never entirely explained, killed 260 sailors and precipitated the Spanish-American War.
A megalithic site located in Kaya Mukti village in the West Java province of Indonesia has been the topic of much controversy over the years. This ancient archaeological discovery sits atop Gunung Padang and was first reported by Dutch geologist and natural scientist Rogier Verbeek, who was an actual witness to the eruption of Krakatoa on August 26, 1883. It was reported again in 1914 by archaeologist N.J. Krom as an ancient cemetery structure on top of the mount, but no further investigations took place. Then, in 1979, locals became aware of the presence of geologists from the Indonesian government on the site. Since then, there has been archaeological activities from Arkanas, which led to site reconstructions in 1985. Its location is 2,904 feet above sea level, and speculators state that it covers an estimated area of 15 hectares at least. A team of Indonesian scientists presented controversial data in Washington in 2018, claiming that Gunung Padang is in fact the site of the world's oldest known pyramid-like structure. The site comprises of the remnants of a massive complex of monumental rows of stone pillars and rocky structures spreading across a hill in an arrangement of terraces that are bordered by retaining walls of stone. To access this, there are about 400 consecutive andesite steps that rise to approximately 312 feet. Andesite is the volcanic equivalent of diorite, and the area is also covered with huge rectangular slabs of rock of volcanic origin. It has been described as the largest megalithic site in all of Southeastern Asia. This is not the most fascinating thing though. Some scientists claim that the sloping hill underneath is not a natural rocky landscape, but is actually a man-made pyramidal structure. Indonesian researchers have stated that their studies prove that the structure does not cover just the top, but also wraps around the slopes, and that the structures are not only superficial, but rooted into greater depth. Pyramid investigator Dr. Sam Osmanagic joined the scientists led by geologist Danny Hillman in Indonesia to research the area. Hillman noted that many surveys and archaeological excavations have been conducted, but never went much deeper than 1 metre into the ground. But a few of these excavated areas exposed buried rock layers that displayed arranged columnar rock structures, similar to the megalithic structure above the ground. Originally, these unearthed columns were understood to be the source of rocks for the megaliths, and were dismissed as natural bedrock. This would explain why Gunung Padang was previously considered as a not-so-extraordinary ancient discovery, and did not get any major attention in the public arena. It was already established as a tourist destination, but only attracted small numbers of sightseers each month. That is, until Dr. Hillman published the results of his geological and geophysical surveys in October 2011. Once he announced to the media that it was a pyramid discovery, Gunung Padang became a primary tourist attraction, with visitors increasing dramatically from about 100 to several thousand each month. During peak seasons this could exceed 15,000 sightseers, so encouraged the provincial and central government to issue policies to follow up the new findings in what they now saw as a potential money pot. In late 2013, a decree by the governor of the West Java province was issued to form a research team for the Gunung Padang cultural site. Then in January 2014, the Ministry of Education and Culture decreed that the status of the site be raised from the provincial level to the prominence of a national heritage site. They dramatically extended the coverage area from 900 square metres to 29 hectares, which embraced the entire mound right down to the surrounding streams. In 2014, a presidential decree for development, conservation, research and management of Gunung Padang was issued. However, this has not yet been implemented by the current Indonesian government. Dr. Hillman had been using advanced technology to survey the site, such as the IFSAR-5M grid digital surface map and the digital terrain map for analysis of regional landscapes surrounding the site. They also conducted 3D aerial photographs using drone technology and software to help visualize the mound in greater detail, coupled with standard geodetical mapping using total stations to diagram further details, including any existing infrastructures. The results of these tests conclude that Gunung Padang has a symmetrical shape on the east and west flanks and appears to have a very low degree of erosion of the top half of the mound. This is in contrast to the surrounding hilly landscapes. The top has been flattened and decorated by the artistic arrangements of rock terraces. So, in general, the shape of the mound has some similarity with a truncated pyramid shape, but not quite enough, as it is more elongated and has a hemispherical rounded shape on the north face and asymmetrical steep slope on the south flank. The findings in short indicate that Gunung Padang mound is not a completely natural hill, but was originally a lava rock mound that had been artificially modified and wrapped by artificial rock layers on the ground. The clearest evidence Dr. Hillman points to is the second layer. This is a more sophisticated man-made structure than the first layer on the ground. It is mainly buried only 1 to 3 metres beneath the surface. The columnar rocks in layer 2 are tightly arranged and stacked together, filled with thin adhesive fillers containing dominantly iron and silica minerals. Layer 3, which is also an artificial rock layer, is found between 5 and 15 metres in depth. The core of the mound which is beneath layer 3, is a natural lava rock. The outer part of the lava rock was carved before it was covered by the artificial rock layers 2 and 3. Therefore the lava rock is the remnant of the natural tertiary volcano, which is millions of years old, but was modified. Radiocarbon dating analysis of organic soils from near the surface and within artificial layers shows that the structures have been built over several ancient periods of the past. The basic geometry of the mound can be classified as a pyramid, but not like the Egyptian or Mayan pyramids. The east-west section shows it was sheared and levelled to a pyramid-like shape similar to the Mayan one, but Gunung Padang has a long axis in north-south section, so it is not symmetrical in all directions. This would suggest that Gunung Padang is a unique kind of pyramid of the Sundaland region in Southeast Asia. Explorations have to be followed up, and there are still big mysteries to be solved, including the possible existence of large cavities or chambers. Dr. Hillman claims he discovered the existence of a triangular room, interior tunnels and streams. He stated that a blanket of sand from the nearby river was also used as a layer in the structure. The similarities between the Padang Pyramid in Indonesia and the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun are fascinating. Both have the similar geometry of a pyramid. Local material was sourced, chambers and interior passageways as well as streams were allegedly identified. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is located above an iron plate mine, whereas the Indonesian one uses volcanic rock, which contains iron as its building material. Iron generates its own electromagnetic energy. Materials used are those which have conductive energy features: quartz in Bosnia and quartz sand in Indonesia. Water plays a very important role, from the generation of electricity to healing qualities. There is definitely more investigating to be done on this ancient enigma, and although those with possible vested interests are pushing it as a pyramid, 99% of archaeologists and geologists in Indonesia disagree with the new claims and say it is a political hoax.
The Roman conquest of the pharaoh's Egypt in the year 30 BC and the push further to the kingdom of Nubia to the south, today's northern Sudan, 7 years later, gave them their first encounter with the extensive pyramids of Egypt and their Nubian replicas. Impressed by this architecture, the Roman conquerors introduced this to their own peninsula. The Great Pyramid of Romulus, which was built near the Vatican, was destroyed in the 16th century. In an unfortunate event of state-sponsored vandalism, the Pyramid of Romulus was stripped down and its marbles were used for the stairs of St. Peter's Basilica. A smaller one was erected by Caius Cestius. A bit of research into his life tells us of a wealthy Roman priest, a magistrate, and most likely military leader. Outside the city walls in the years of 18 to 12 BC, between two ancient roads, one leading to the Ostia harbour and the other to the Tiber River, Cestius had his pyramid built. 300 years later, with the expansion of Rome and construction of the additional fortification, the pyramid became a part of the defensive wall and therefore has been preserved to the present day. Pyramid researcher Dr. Sam Osmanagic, PhD, has investigated this monument. The pyramid has a square base of 100 Roman feet, approximately 29.6 meters, and a height of 125 Roman feet, 37 meters. Its slope of 70 degrees is an elegant copy of the Nubian pyramids, as well as those of the pharaoh's dynasty of Ptolemy, which the Romans had conquered. The pyramid is made of concrete, and this allowed for its sides and slopes angles to be very precise. The concrete is covered with marble pieces which are beautifully fitted together. Its height is greater than both the modern Parisian pyramid and the Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan. Some 20,000 tons of material is contained in this construction. Inside there's a rectangular chamber of 5.95 by 4.1 by 4.8 meters. This room was completely closed off with no access. When in 1660 they tunneled into it, it was found to be richly decorated with frescoes, but almost nothing of this remains today. No furniture, statues, bones, tools, or organic material were ever found there. Bronze statues and marble columns were found around the pyramid in the 17th century. At that time, there were 2 bases of marble found near the pyramid, where there probably had been statues. The pyramid was surrounded by a low wall. Caius Cestius was signed on the east side of the pyramid, where they mention, chiseled in the marble, that he was the son of Lucius of the Pabili family. Reconstruction of the interior of the pyramid has been going on since 2001. Following the trace of this harmonious structure, one can trace its design in what's now the Republic of Sudan. If one is coming from the capital Khartoum, it takes more than 200 kilometers to reach the remains of an ancient city that rises from the arid and inhospitable terrain. Another option is to cross the border between Egypt and Sudan in the valley of the River Nile known as Nubia. Nestled between the sand dunes, the secluded pyramids seem to have been forgotten by the outside world. There are no facilities to serve and support tourism. The ancient civilization of Nubia was a rich and powerful African culture just south of Egypt up the River Nile. The two had a long and varied relationship, from trade and conquering and subjugation. For this reason, the two had similar religions, customs, visual conventions, and monumental buildings. The pyramid tradition was actually brought back by the Nubians long after it had ceased to be used by the Egyptians. The form was significantly different, being smaller, more steeply sloped, and more numerous, serving whole families. They also had eastern-facing temples for offerings, facing, and presumably used at sunrise. The pyramids are found on the east bank of the River Nile near a group of villages called Bagra Aiwa. They got their name from the ancient city of Mirau, the capital of the Kingdom of Kush. The competition between two civilizations led up to even the occupation of Egypt during Napata rule King Pinkhai. This was the time of the Nubian pharaohs from the 20th dynasty. And although they were soon overpowered by the Assyrian conquests, cultural and architectural styles of the neighbors had left a deep imprint. The most prominent example of the impact of Egypt is the construction of 224, or 350 depending on their definition, pyramids during the period of a few hundred years. The Golden Age of Nubia started as early as the 3rd dynasty pharaoh in Egypt, when the first kingdom of Kushite in Nubia was established. Kerma, 2600 to 1520 BC. The primacy was later assumed by Napata Center, 1000 to 300 BC, and then the last, Mirau, 300 BC to 300 AD. The pyramids were built between the middle of the 8th century BC until the 4th century, a period close to 1100 years. There are 3 main grounds of Nubia with the pyramids: Al-Keru, which was used for almost 100 years, Nuri for the period of almost 400 years, and Mirau for a period of more than 600 years. Gebel Barkal is often attributed with pyramids, but in reality this is a site also called Nuri. The majority of the pyramids are today reduced to only rubble. Some have the lower parts in good condition, and a few have been reconstructed to their original shape and size. The finest pyramids are found at Mirau. They are the most recent. A pyramid excavated at Mirau included hundreds of heavy items, such as large blocks decorated with rock art and 390 stones that comprise the pyramid. A cow buried complete with eye ointment was also unearthed in the area to be flooded by the Mirau Dam, as were ringing rocks that were trapped to create a melodic sound. All of the pyramid tombs of Nubia were plundered in ancient times. Wall reliefs preserved in the tomb chapels revealed that their royal occupants were covered with jewelry and laid to rest in wooden mummy cases. At the time of their exploration by archaeologists in the 19th and 20th centuries, some pyramids were found to contain the remains of bows, quivers of arrows, archers' thumb rings, horse harnesses, wooden boxes, furniture, pottery, colored glass, metal vessels, and many other artifacts attesting to extensive Mareotic trade with Egypt and the Hellenistic world. The Nubian pyramids are far smaller than their Egyptian counterparts. In most cases, a large Nubian pyramid is between 20 and 30 meters high. Taharqa's pyramid at Nuri is an exception, having reached almost 50 meters. The smallest structures that still are counted for pyramids were 6 meters. Nubian pyramids were most certainly a continuation of the Egyptian tradition. even if construction techniques had to be reinvented. They were very faithful to their Egyptian ideal, built with a substructure and a chapel for ceremonies. Nubian pyramids were built with stepped courses of horizontally positioned stone blocks. The material they used was granite and sandstone. Angles were far steeper than the Egyptian pyramids, between 65 and 70 degrees, compared to the range of 36 to 60 degrees. This was possible from one advantage of the smaller size. Inner pressure was far smaller. Although the pyramids of Nubia are less impressive than the Egyptian ones, it's important to remember that Nubia had far less inhabitants. But the Nubians built far more pyramids for each generation. A larger part of the royal family were buried in a pyramid, unlike in Egypt. As it's very well known, no mummies have ever been found in Egyptian pyramids. The pyramids weathered and decayed over the ages, following the collapse of the Nubian state. But natural causes by no means account for their current state of desolation. In 1834, Giuseppe Fellini, an Italian explorer serving with the Egyptian army, led a treasure-hunting expedition culminating at the site. With both a military attachment and hundreds of local workers, Fellini had the pyramids demolished. The team began by leveling the smaller pyramids. Next, they attacked one of the largest, shortening it from the top block by block. There was a secret chamber found in this one, housing a trove of silver and gold, jewelry and offerings. Fellini fled the site with his treasure, fearing that the workers would mutiny to claim the wealth. This provided a grave precedent, leading British Museum curator E.A.W. Budge to later fruitlessly dynamite the tops off the remaining pyramids.
Nikola Tesla, 1856 to 1943, was probably the greatest ever inventor in the fields of electricity and magnetism, one who will be hard to surpass. In 1977, on the occasion of the celebration of the 120th anniversary of the birth of Nikola Tesla, organised by the Yugoslav Academy of Arts and Science, the Skolsa Publishing Enterprise in Zagreb published Tesla's autobiography, My Inventions. In this book, Tesla describes, among other things, his original idea and the purpose for constructing the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, which for various reasons was never completed nor made operational. Here is an extract from Chapter 5 of his book. One day, as I was roaming in the mountains, I sought shelter from an approaching storm. The sky became overhung with heavy clouds, but somehow the rain was delayed until, all of a sudden, there was a lightning flash and, a few moments after, a deluge. This observation set me thinking. It was manifest that the two phenomena were closely related as cause and effect, and a little reflection led me to the conclusion that the electrical energy involved in the precipitation of the water was inconsiderable, the function of lightning being much like that of a sensitive trigger. Here was a stupendous possibility of achievement. If we could produce electric effects of the required quality, this whole planet and the conditions of existence on it could be transformed. The sun raises the water of the oceans, and winds drive it to distant regions, where it remains in a state of most delicate balance. If it were in our power to upset it when and wherever desired, this mighty life-sustaining stream could be at will controlled. We could irrigate arid deserts, create lakes and rivers, and provide motive power in unlimited amounts. This would be the most efficient way of harnessing the sun to the uses of man. The consummation depended on our ability to develop electric forces of the order of those in nature. It seemed a hopeless undertaking, but I made up my mind to try it, and immediately on my return to the United States in the summer of 1892, work was begun, which was to me all the more attractive because a means of the same kind was necessary for the successful transmission of energy without wires. Dr. Nikola Tesla saw clearly that water is life, the essential element in the origin and the development of life on planet Earth. In arid regions there are hardly any life forms. Only water can make the desert green. Tesla wanted to make a device that would create lightning and thus cause rain, which would create a favorable climate in the desert. Lightning is a phenomenon of electric discharge, and its audible manifestation is thunder. Even today, scientists are busy trying to understand and explain certain phenomena in relation to lightning strikes. Condensation processes in the atmosphere cause accumulation of electricity in clouds. The polarization of charges within storm clouds leads to an increase in electric potential between certain parts, which results in electric discharge. Electric discharges can appear within a cloud, between two clouds, or between a cloud and the ground. The latter is of interest to us, a gigantic short circuit between the sky and the ground. In 1750, Benjamin Franklin discovered that electricity is not evenly distributed over all the elements of a conductor's surface, except in the case of a sphere. Its distribution depends on the extent of curvature of the observed surface elements. Generally speaking, higher charge density is located on their edges, on protuberant and pointed parts rather than on round and flat ones. Statistically, lightning always strikes along the path which is more conductive, i.e. the path with the higher charge density. Franklin found in his experiments that the pointier and more conductive the lightning rod, the easier it was to attract lightning during an electric storm. That is why he designed his metal lightning rod with a gilded point. However, since then, there has been controversy over whether lightning rods should have a point or a ball at the tip. Nikola Tesla predicted in 1892 that the ideal lightning antenna, a receiver and emitter of lightning strikes, should have a blunt, not a pointed tip. In 1918, he was granted US patent number 1266175 on a lightning protector design because of a fault in Franklin's theory. The pointed rod ionizes the surrounding air, rendering the air conductive and thus raising the probability of a lightning strike. A paper titled Lightning Rod Improvement Studies by C.B. Moore et al., published in the Journal of Applied Meteorology in May 2000, further confirmed Tesla's theory. So, while Franklin invented the lightning rod, the technical solution to attracting natural lightning from clouds, Tesla wanted to make a device that would create lightning in cloudless desert areas and thus induce rainfall. In the discharge tunnel of a natural lightning strike, the temperature is about 30,000 degrees Celsius. The electric charge reaches 40 megavolts, and the electric current is around 110 kiloamps. It is estimated that the energy of an average lightning strike is about 40 megawatt hours. Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower was supposed to use a transformer to create high voltage and, instead of natural lightning, produce high-energy ionic smouldering discharge. Tesla envisioned an 8-sided pyramid with a half-sphere on top as the basis for this device. Why? How do state-of-the-art air conditioning devices work? They regulate air temperature and humidity and also generate negative ions. The influence of negative ions on human health has been known for about 60 years, and a great deal of scientific research has been conducted. There are constant biochemical processes of oxidation and reduction taking place in the human body, which requires negatively charged ions to function properly. All living things receive negatively charged ions from the air through the skin and respiratory organs. When there are enough negative ions in a room, what results is an increase in oxygen content in the blood and the normalization of the heartbeat rate, thus accelerating the excretion of toxins. Due to better blood flow in the brain, concentration and other mental capabilities are strengthened. The consequences of stress are neutralized, and tension and headaches are relieved. Negative ions bind with toxins in the body, which means they act as antioxidants, thus preventing the development of degenerative disease. In nature, the most favorable condition of air ionization is after thunderstorms, cloudbursts, and downpours when atmospheric discharges occur. That is when there are noticeably more negative than positive ions in the air. Increased concentrations of negative oxygen ions are also found near waterfalls, in pine forests, on mountains, along the seashore, and also in caves. What was the function of pyramids? To produce lightning? No, it wasn't. For thousands of years after having been built, pyramids functioned and continue to function as generators of negative ions. In order for pyramids to continuously ionize the surrounding air, they need to be connected to a permanent source of negative ions. How was this done? Where are these energy power lines which lead to the pyramids? The Giza Plateau hides an abundance of underground water. Huge underground rivers flowing around the pyramids are full of negative ions and, by the piezoelectric effect, they transpond these ions to each pyramid, which then accumulates them and discharges the surplus at the apex. All the pyramids on the plateau are built from stone, with a high content of crystal capable of binding electric charges from water when underground water mechanically presses against the crystal. If we expose the crystal to mechanical deformation, bound electric charges appear on the surface, a phenomenon known as the piezoelectric effect. The crystal is the converter of mechanical into electrical energy. Due to continuous charging and discharging of the pyramid, which is electrically charged from underground rivers, the pyramid contracts and expands, which results in continuous microquakes. Obelisks, churches, and mosques as ionizers. Obelisks function on an identical principle. They are pillars made of crystalline stone with a pyramidion of gold, silver, or copper placed on top, and they are located over underground water. An obelisk is actually an air ionizer. The above-mentioned principle has been applied to old churches and mosques which were built using stone with a highly crystalline content. The church towers and mosque domes were mostly made of copper, silver, or gold. Almost all old churches and mosques were located over underground water flows, natural sources of negative ions. A favourable negative ionization can be sensed even inside these churches and mosques. Standing stones as ionizers. The megaliths, which we find all over the world, are the most primitive form of air ionizers. These standing stones are made of crystal material and are located above underground water flows, but they do not have the pointed top made of conductive material and therefore have less power to ionize air. This power deficiency was solved by erecting a large number of megaliths in some areas, which increased the total power. The Bosnian standing stones belong to that group. They are unique monumental stone blocks which are densely spread over the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, southern parts of Croatia, western Montenegro, and southwestern Serbia. Standing stone blocks are signs of a common national custom, and as tombstones they are a mark of the medieval culture in those regions. However, they are the heritage and autochthonous treasure of an ancient civilization whose identity and time frame remain unknown to archaeologists and historians. Dubravko Lovrenović, Ph.D., a member of the Committee for Preservation of National Monuments of Bosnia and Herzegovina, estimates that there are over 100,000 standing stones in Bosnia and Herzegovina alone. Although these standing stones are as a rule scattered, and many have been relocated, and the accompanying barrows have been rebuilt many times, the stones are found in streaks or lines. Almost without exception, the direction of these streaks is from south to north. It is estimated that the real number of stone blocks is much greater than the number of registered Bosnian standing stones. Many of them have been lost, destroyed, used for construction, or simply have not been found. Tunnels and caves as sources of negative ions. While Bosnian standing stones and obelisks exclusively have an outward effect, favourable ionization can be felt within the hollow spaces of a church, a mosque, and a pyramid. Apart from underground water flows, the pyramid utilizes an additional source of negative ions, a natural cave, which enhances the beneficial ionization effect of the pyramid. The Pyramid of Cheops has a cave, called the Grotto, located at its base within granite rock, and the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, Mexico, was built on the top of a cave which was only discovered in 1970. Any pyramid which does not contain a cave is connected by a tunnel to a remote cave. Underground tunnels beneath pyramids serve as artificial caves. Spending time in them is very good for one's health. Results of radar measurements on the Giza Plateau, conducted by Egyptian geophysicists, were published in the Egyptian National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics. 350 meters southeast of the Pyramid of Cheops, the Egyptian geophysicists registered the signal of a potential tunnel. The more moisture there is in the tunnel, the more electric charges the air can accumulate. In order to prevent the limestone from taking all these negative charges from the Giza Plateau, the original constructors of the pyramid complex in Giza isolated the tunnel with stones built into the walls of the tunnel. Scientists from the Schmidt Institute of Physics of the Earth in Moscow have been analyzing microquakes on the surface of pyramids for many years, and have developed many theories on the reasons behind them. They have conducted measurements of seismic noises on about 60 pyramids in Egypt. A crystalline pyramid, with its accompanying underground rivers, caves and tunnels, functions as a generator of useful negative ions with automatic power regulation. In 1892, Dr. Nikola Tesla got the idea to create a machine for the production of rain which would create favourable conditions for developing life in some regions. This machine was supposed to work on the principle of strong ionization of the atmosphere in a split second. While Tesla's idea was to ionize the atmosphere by electric shock, the original pyramid builders were in possession of a technology capable of less powerful but continuous and almost unnoticeable ionization of the atmosphere. Thousands of years after having been built, the Bosnian pyramids still function excellently to this day. These pyramids are covered in green vegetation, and the landscape around them is marked with green valleys with plenty of beneficial negative electric charges which come from underneath the pyramids. Continuous ionization of the atmosphere preserves local ecosystems. The whole Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids contains a network of underground tunnels and rivers as confirmed by numerous groundwater aquifers. The fact that the Egyptian pyramids are now situated in a desert landscape with no green vegetation brings me to the conclusion that they are not functioning well. There must have been some kind of failure in the system. Perhaps the underground tunnels caved in. Perhaps somebody deliberately closed some of the tunnels and therefore obstructed the stream of negative ions. Perhaps some underground waters dried out, or a great flood caused a redirection of underground water flows. It remains a mystery. After 92 years we remember Tesla's tower with its pyramidal shape and half-sphere on top. Tesla was at the initial stage of research into technology that perhaps had already been developed and used by ancient constructors of pyramids. It is hoped that the heritage of this forgotten genius, Nikola Tesla, may inspire researchers to implement his idea to solve the mystery of the pyramids worldwide.
When we talk about pyramids, the best known and the first to come to mind are those of Giza and those of Mexico, but there are many other pyramids in Egypt, not to mention those in South America. There are also allegedly examples in Romania and Bosnia-Herzegovina, North America, China, Korea and Italy, though the evidence for the latter group is thin to say the least. One of the latest pyramids discovered is the apparently colossal pyramid in Romania, which would have to be, according to some alternative historians and researchers, more than 15,000 years old. For archaeologists and most researchers, it is merely a natural hill, but for some this confirms that in the remote past there were several pre-Diluvian civilizations that were responsible for creating these pyramids all over the world. The fact that the various pyramids scattered all over the world vary massively in date from prehistoric to medieval does not seem to bother these researchers. Apparently these ancient civilizations had the power and knowledge to travel between continents, and thus were able, for a reason we still don't know, to build pyramids that were very similar. Usually the pyramids share a similar structure and were created as places of extreme importance to the daily life of the community, possibly ceremonial centres dedicated to the gods. Although we know of those pyramids that were built a few hundred, sometimes thousands of years ago, in recent years the evidence has been accumulating in regard to antediluvian civilizations, that is, civilizations that prospered before the last glaciation. This glaciation and the subsequent deluge occurred about 14,000 years ago. According to a few researchers, and apparently, these people lost in time would have been pyramid builders. The existence of these forgotten ancestors resides in ancient documents, such as the list of the Sumerian kings, and in the timeline of the Egyptian pharaohs that governed until the moment the gods descended to the earth. For some, the most recent evidence of antediluvian civilizations would be the Bosnian pyramids, discovered in 2005 by Sam Osmanagic. These constructions above the village of Visoko have been dated by him to between 12,500 and 30,000 years. Osmanagic calls one the Pyramid of the Moon and claims it is the world's largest and oldest step pyramid. At the opposite side of town is the so-called Pyramid of the Sun, which, at 720 feet, dwarfs the Great Pyramids of Egypt. A third pyramid, he says, is in the nearby hills. All of them, he says, are at least 12,000 years old, despite the fact that during that time most of Europe was under a mile-thick sheet of ice, and most of humanity had yet to invent agriculture. As a group, Osmanagic says these structures are part of the greatest pyramidal complex ever built on the face of the earth. But archaeologists remain unmoved. The landform Osmanagic is calling a pyramid is actually quite common, agrees Paul Heinrich, an archaeological geologist at Louisiana State University. They're called flatirons in the United States, and you see a lot of them out west. He adds that there are hundreds around the world, including the Russian twin pyramids in Vladivostok. There is another interesting mound in the Carpathian Mountains, 1,000 metres above sea level, that has captured the imagination of some alternative history enthusiasts. This pyramid has a height of 300 metres. The Pyramid of Cheops in Giza is 150 metres high, and the Pyramid of Bosnia about 220 metres. So the pyramid discovered in Romania would be more similar to that of Cheops, and would be about 80 metres more than the Pyramid of Bosnia. Some researchers who climbed to the top of the mountain found remnants of ancient stone walls consisting of 3 layers of overlapping stone, fixed together with clay, which is a material that provides extensive protection against rainwater, and is also an excellent material with which to join stones together. Probably the most fascinating aspect of the fortification was the thick reddish-brown layer of material composed of mineral oxides that covered the outer wall of the pyramid. Based on the kind of plaster that covers up even the cracks between the stones, researchers were able to date the structure using a technique known as dowsing, which resulted in the stones apparently dating back to between 22,000 and 25,000 years old. Further proof of an advanced ancient culture in Romania that was able to construct huge pyramids are the clay tablets that were unearthed in Tătăria, Transylvania, bearing inscriptions belonging to the Vinca culture, who possessed a writing system which according to some predates that of the Sumerians. The inscribed clay tablets were found in a Neolithic context at Tătăria in Romania in 1961. The signs on the tablets are comparable with those of the script of the late pre-dynastic period in Mesopotamia. It seems unlikely, however, that the tablets were drafted by a Sumerian hand
or in the Sumerian language of early Mesopotamia. The shapes of the tablets and some of the signs are paralleled in the Minoan scripts of Crete, but the tablets do not seem to be Cretan. There are indications that a similar use of signs, if not actual writing, was practiced in the rest of the Aegean and in the western Anatolia before the end of the 3rd millennium BC. A knowledge of writing or the use of signs derived from it may have spread to these regions and to the Balkans from Mesopotamia through Syria. This was perhaps one aspect of a common inheritance of religious or magical beliefs and practices. However, the authenticity of the engravings has been disputed from the beginning. A recent claim of forgery is based on the similarity between some of the symbols and reproductions of Sumerian symbols in popular Romanian literature available at the time of discovery. Some researchers have connected this strange Romanian text with what was allegedly found in the cave of the Taos, Ecuador. In 1976, a major expedition entered the cave in search of artificial tunnels, lost gold, strange sculptures, and a metallic library, supposedly left by a lost civilization aided by extraterrestrials. Among this group was the astronaut Neil Armstrong. The indigenous Shuar people of Ecuador have been entering the vast cave system on the jungle-covered eastern foothills of the Andes for centuries. They descend using ladders made of vines through one of 3 dangerous entrances, the largest of which is a 213-foot deep shaft that leads into a network of tunnels and chambers stretching for at least 2.85 miles. For the Shuar, these caves have always been a centre for spiritual and ceremonial practices, home to powerful spirits as well as tarantulas, scorpions, spiders and rainbow boas. As guardians of the cave system, the Shuar have been left in relative peace over the last century or two. However, in 1971, Erich von Daniken's The Gold of the Gods was published, and in it he told the obscure story of one Janos van Moritz, an explorer who claimed to have entered the caves in 1969. Inside the cave, he said, he had discovered a treasure trove of gold, strange artifacts and sculptures, and a metallic library containing lost texts preserved on metal tablets. And the caves themselves were definitely man-made, he claimed, created by some advanced intelligence now lost to history. Back to the pyramids. According to some researchers and authors, some pyramids could be connected by underground tunnels that stretch for thousands of miles. This has apparently been proven by the use of probes, which send electromagnetic impulses through the earth, and have found extensive cavities that are hundreds of thousands of miles long. But the main problem with this theory of a single ancient global super race building the pyramids is that it does a great disservice to our ancestors. Some supporters of the theory, such as Erich von Daniken and Zechariah Sitchin, claim that the ancient Egyptians were too backward to have constructed the pyramids without the help of extraterrestrials. However, it is undeniable that with so many ancient enigmas only now being brought to light, it should not surprising that future archaeological advances and discoveries will force us to rethink at least some aspects of what we know of the history of mankind. But it should be the study of real, not imagined ancient monuments like pyramids that will help us in these endeavours.
The recent discovery of 6 ancient pyramids at an ancient city known as Caral along the Peruvian coast has shocked the archaeological world. The existence of pyramids indicates the presence of a civilization around 5,000 years ago, which would make it the oldest known civilization in the Americas. But that's not all. Not only is this civilization older than anything previously discovered, but it was also far more advanced than archaeologists ever thought possible at that remote period. The ancient city of Corral in the Sup Valley, a region of Peru's high desert in between the rainforests, mountains, and the Pacific coast, 120 miles north of Peru's capital city of Lima. The valley here is full of ancient monumental structures. Corral was first discovered in 1905, but was largely ignored by archaeologists because they believed its structures were of relatively recent date. The city was further explored by American history professor Paul Kosok in 1948, but not fully excavated, and it was not until the 1970s that archaeologists discovered that the large hills at Corral, thought by previous explorers and archaeologists to be natural hills, were actually ancient pyramids. Since the 1990s, studies and excavations at Corral have been undertaken by Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis of San Marcos University. Fortunately for archaeologists, Corral is remarkably well preserved, mainly due to its early abandonment and late discovery. The vast urban complex of Corral takes up more than 150 acres and contains plazas, dwellings, pyramids, and a 92-foot-high temple. Shady's excavations at the site also uncovered a large sunken amphitheater, which could have held hundreds of people, probably during civic or religious events. Inside the amphitheater, archaeologists discovered 32 flutes made of pelican and condor bones, as well as 37 cornets of deer and llama bones. Clearly, music played an important role in their society, said Shady. During one season of excavation, Shady's team examined Pyramid Maya at 60 feet in height and covering an area nearly the size of 4 American football fields, the largest of the 6 pyramids at the site. Inside, they found a 30-foot-wide staircase, circular walls covered with the remains of colored plaster, and square brickwork. But what proved to be their most significant find was located in the foundations of the great structure. Here, they discovered the well-preserved remains of reed-woven bags known as shikras. Shady thought that the workers who built these ancient structures would have filled these bags with stones from a hillside quarry located a mile away and laid them on top of one another inside retaining walls, gradually building up the giant structure of the pyramid. But most significant of all was the fact that the reeds which made up the basket could be radiocarbon dated. The academic world was astonished at these results, which demonstrate that Corral dated back to 2627 BC, and so is 1,000 years older than the earliest known civilization in the Americas. Jonathan Haas, MacArthur Curator of Anthropology at the Field Museum, Chicago, said of the incredible findings, "The scale and sophistication of these sites is unheard of anywhere in the New World at this time. The cultural pattern that emerged in this small area in the 3rd millennium BC later established a foundation for 4,000 years of cultural fluorescence in other parts of the Andes." This date means that Corral was a thriving metropolis as Egypt's Great Pyramids and England's Stonehenge were being built. Ruth Shady Solis believes that Corral may be the answer to the long unanswered question about the mysterious origins of the Inca, the civilization that once stretched from modern-day Ecuador to central Chile and were responsible for building sites like Cusco and Machu Picchu. But one important question puzzles Shady. Why would people who live comfortably in small communities on the Pacific Ocean with easy access to plentiful marine food choose to move miles inland to a harsh desert environment? Evidence from Shady's excavations at Corral, including necklaces of snails and the seeds of the coca plant, neither of which was native to the area, convinced her that the site had served as an important trading center for the region. The wealth accumulated as a result of this trade caused the emergence of an elite of priests and planners, builders and architects. According to Shady, the class distinctions essential to an urban society thus emerged at Corral. The main non-edible product grown in the area seems to have been cotton, which was widely used in the manufacture of fishing nets, clothing, bags and ornaments. Indeed, cotton farming is believed to have been the main reason for the rise of inland settlements. But Corral was not an isolated site. Soon 20 other pyramid complexes, which seem to have been based on the mother city, emerged scattered across the 35-square-mile area of the Soup Valley. Archaeologists believe that the Corral civilization, also known as Corral Soup, was part of the Norte Chico civilization complex, who lived in what is now the Norte Chico region of north-central coastal Peru. One unique aspect of the Norte Chico was its architecture. Their cities were important urban centers with monumental terraced stone pyramids and large sunken circular plazas. Around 1800 BC, for reasons which have not been fully explained, the Norte Chico civilization collapsed and its cities were abandoned. The inhabitants just had time to protect some of their architectural structures by burying them before they left. Some experts suggest that climate change may have been a factor in the disappearance of the Norte Chico civilization, whilst others maintain that they didn't disappear at all. One theory is that the Norte Chico moved to other parts of Peru, taking their culture with them. One very likely scenario is that they took their irrigation further north and further south to areas that were more productive. It's interesting that in the Casma Valley, which is directly north, there are even bigger pyramids, and that was the next major cultural event. Recently, there has been much controversy over whether the North Chico Society at Corral and other sites actually constitutes a civilization. Many anthropologists and archaeologists have their own, often different definitions of the word, and the Norte Chico people do not qualify according to some of them. Professor Creamer commented, "Some people would say they were not a civilization. They had very few arts and crafts, for example. They were pre-ceramic. And if civilization needs urbanization, well, we don't know if these sites qualify as urban centers yet." Excavations are continuing in Peru's Soup Valley, and many important new discoveries are being reported. More ancient cities, pyramids and plazas have been found in an area which not so long ago was thought to be unlivable due to the harshness of the environment. After much more controversial results of recent research has been the new radiocarbon dates obtained from the ancient cities surrounding Corral. Shockingly, these dates suggest some of these cities may be even older than Corral. For some archaeologists, this is evidence that the true oldest city in the Americas has not yet been discovered. The energy phenomena registered above the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun request a different definition of the pyramids instead of the conventional, dogmatic explanations. The pyramids are energy amplifiers which have been sending and receiving information. The discovery of the Tesla scalar waves above the top of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, traveling faster than the speed of light, empowers the concept of the existence of the cosmic internet, providing almost instant intergalactic communication in the universe. Dr. Sam Osmanagic's research and arguments that the pyramids were constructed all over the world and that the oldest ones are also most superior have led to the situations in which Egyptologists built up the hostility wall in his direction in previous 2 decades. His assertion that the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is the oldest in the world has provoked the reaction of the world's most influential Egyptologist, Dr. Zani Hawaz, and banning the Bosnian Pyramid project for many years the access to the leading scientific TV channels in the world. The evidence of the oldest concrete of the best quality in the world, which has been discovered on the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, and the existence of the largest network of prehistorical tunnels have caused the written petition of the European Archaeological Association against the research. Of course, the time and the scientific arguments prove that they were wrong. Therefore, the new history is getting written, not only of Europe, but also the whole world as well. But it's not only that the history books are wrong inside our education system, we're taught wrongly, or to say better, programmed with all of the basic knowledge. The physicists, astronomers and geologists persist with the assertion that the Big Bang Theory created the cosmos out of nothingness and that today it's expanding rapidly. The biologists still support the Darwinism, inclined to say that life is created from inorganic matter, that the evolution is the cause for the wildlife experiment, and that humans originate from a monkey. they were all wrong. The life originates from the intervention, genetic engineering on our planet. The species are changing over a long period of time through the experiments in which the evolution plays only a small role. Homo sapiens is the result of genetic engineering, and of course, we aren't the first of the most developed civilizations in this planetary history. Philosophy, physics, mathematics, and the engineering insights can explain the cosmos, the creation of our planet, and the life on Earth. But along with conventional knowledge, it is necessary to deprogram ourselves and open up to the spiritual knowledge and the sacral geometry in order to understand the energetical essence of all living and unliving matter. Let's put us in the role of the creator of the cosmos. We start creating a large number of galaxies from the center of the universe. At the present time, the assumption is that there are around 400 billion galaxies in our cosmos. These assumptions of the number of galaxies have tended to risen in the past several decades. Each galaxy has many star systems. For example, in our galaxy, the Milky Way, it's estimated up to 10 years ago there were 100 billion stars. However, we now speak about 400 billion stars. Amongst these 4 billion is also our Sun. Each star has several planets. We are, for example, the third planet in the solar system. Furthermore, planets have moons, sometimes one, sometimes dozens, and so on. Let's go back to the creator's role. If we created such immense and complex systems with an almost endless number of cosmic objects, we ask ourselves how to manage them, how to monitor the condition of all objects, and how to set up an efficient communication system. Einstein's physics teaches us that the fastest speed in the universe is the speed of light. 300,000 kilometers per second is almost about enough for our earthly conditions. But for the light to travel from the Earth to the Sun, it takes almost 8 minutes. That's rather slow. To reach the second nearest star, it would take 4 years for light to travel. It takes 26,000 years to get to the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, another 40,000 light years to get to the nearest galaxy. And finally, it takes 5 billion years for information to reach the center of the universe from our solar system. The speed of light would be very impractical and too slow for the Creator to have communication with all of these cosmic subjects. Is there a speed greater than the speed of light? According to Einstein, no object with real mass in action could travel at the speed of light. However, to the whole new wave of independent researchers, the limitation of the speed of light isn't the obstacle for a faster speed existing. A German physicist, Dr. Konstantin Mail, says that neutrino particles are able to travel faster. For many other researchers, among the most prominent is Tesla. Scalar waves are traveling at faster speeds than the light. It's estimated to be 10 billion times faster than light. Also, the scalar waves can move through any other cosmic body, planets and suns, without wasting energy. This means they are able to travel at great velocity, transfer information and energy, and there's no loss of the quality and the quantity of the information. Ideally, at both ends you'd have a generator of the energy which are mutually communicating through Tesla's scalar waves. The information transfer is almost instant between two distant parts of the cosmos. Many elapsed cultures on our planet have regarded the sun as the Father Sun. Mayans, for example, had great respect for the cosmic father. The sun isn't giving us only the heat and energy, therefore life itself, but it's also giving us information, refines us, and affects our DNA. Short gazing at the sun during sunrise or sunset is beneficial for us on the physical and spiritual level. The pyramid is the most powerful of all geometric shapes in terms of energies. If located over the potent energy spot, the pyramid becomes the energy amplifier. Under the Bosnian pyramid of the Sun, there are iron plates, generating an electromagnetic field, underground water flow, releasing negative ions, and the second one, deeper underground water flow, creates an electrical charge with the one from above. Also, we find the natural magnetism orgone energy. These energy phenomena can be measured with scientific instruments. During the archaeological excavations, great amounts of quartz crystals were discovered on the surface of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. It's also found in the underground tunnels. It's well known that the quartz crystals receives and then amplifies the energies. The cavities, the underground tunnels, also amplify the energy. If we add up the very precise layout of the pyramids in Visoko, equilateral triangle between the pyramids of the Sun, Moon and Dragon, and another triangle between the pyramids of the Love, Earth and River Phorgenica, then the application of the other elements of the sacral geometry, flower of life, irrational numbers, Fibonacci formula, then there is no doubt that all of this contributed to the development of an energy complex of great power which has been named the Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids. Research of physicists, electrical engineers and sound engineers on the energy phenomena of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun and underground tunnels, along with a comparison with other natural hills around Visoko, have been taking place since 2010. The teams from Croatia, Italy, Finland, Germany and other countries have discovered the existence of energy beams over the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun with a frequency of 28 kHz, which is focused and continuous. In September 2016, an international team from Serbia, Croatia and Slovenia, led by the engineer Goran Mojunovic from Belgrade, went one step further. They mounted instruments on a drone and took it 50 meters above the Bosnian pyramids. During the flight, it went horizontal every 10 meters on all four sides of the world. The electrical field was measured over the top of the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. After 2 months of information processing, the engineer Mojunovic had two revolutionary conclusions. One, the beam over the pyramid top, with the previously established radius of 4.5 meters, is expanding in radius and getting stronger. It's strongest at 21.3 meters above the pyramid. After then it gets weaker, and then at 43.3 meters it has the same value as at the null point on the ground. Or, in engineer Mojunovic's words, the synthesis of the recorded values and the electrical field intensity allocation analysis in vertical and horizontal flats allows us to conclude that the energy field above the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun has the shape of an oval, uneven ellipsoid with the biggest density of the energy at the height similar to the virtual height of the pyramid. The represented waviness in relation to the intensity and the orientation in the wave mechanics terminology would be 3D standing wave or complex scalar waves. For many years, it's been wondered about the orientation of this energy beam. Is it directed towards a particular solar system, Orion, Pleiades, Alpha Centauri, or towards a particular planet in another solar system? The Earth's rotation of 462 meters per second doesn't give enough time to focus the beam to a particular cosmic object or eventual information transmission. However, the findings of Goran Mojunovic's team give a completely logical explanation for the beam's direction. Namely, they found the following. The analysis of the registered values during the horizontal flight at about 40 meters of height indicate slightly raised values in the south-southwest zone that indicates that the beam is slightly inclined in the direction of the southwest. Considering that the measurements were performed at noon and during the afternoon, it's logical that the energy wave was following the sun's movement. Therefore, the communication between the Earth and its star is ongoing during most of the day. The cosmos with the endless quick and efficient communication couldn't exist if it's filled up with a vast number of black holes which are expanding and consume all on its way. The cosmos couldn't exist too if it was filled with never-ending vacuums in which there are no particles which facilitate the transport and communication. Therefore, the design system with the existing communication needs another kind of definition of the cosmos and its elements. The creators of the electrical cosmos idea, in which everything is based on electrical particles, has been gaining more supporters because they explain in a logical way almost all the cosmic processes. They don't start the story with the irrational Big Bang theory. That's why the existence of superfast and superconductivity cosmos without the internal discontinuity and black holes is logical. The cosmos is limited, and behind everything is the cosmic mind, the creator. Besides ours, it created endless numbers of other universes. and in order to visit them, it would be necessary to take a cosmic dimensional leap. We are all just part of the cosmic internet together with all other cosmic entities in space, including our Creator. The information transmission is almost instant, regardless of the fair distances. Thereby, the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun on our small mother planet is a link into the cosmic internet. An ancient sacred Mayan ritual site is opened for the first time in over 1,000 years. What the explorer discovers in there is so shocking, he seals the cave back up, destroys all records of his findings, and never speaks of it again, until now. In March 2019, Mexican archaeologists announced that they had discovered an extraordinary treasure trove of well-preserved Mayan artifacts under the ancient city of Chichen Itza in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The artifacts were found in a series of cave chambers called Balamku, less than 2 miles from the famed pyramid known as the Temple of Kukulkan, which sits in the center of the site. Guillermo de Anda, an investigator with the National Institute of Anthropology and History, said that the remarkable discovery could help researchers rewrite the history of Chichen Itza, one of the Mayan civilization's greatest cities. It is built on top of a network of waterways, including sinkholes which the ancient Maya believed were sacred places that provided a portal to the underworld. The lead explorer spoke in detail about how he had to crawl through the tight tunnels of Balamku for several hours before his headlamp illuminated something entirely unexpected. A cascade of offerings led by the ancient residents of Chichen Itza, so perfectly preserved and untouched that stalagmites had formed around the incense burners, vases, decorated plates, and other objects in the cavern. But what's most startling about this discovery is that this is not the first time this amazing site has been unearthed. Local residents and farmers had originally told the Mexican authorities about the existence of the cave over 5 decades ago. In 1966, Balamku, which translates as the Cave of the Jaguar God, was visited by archaeologist Victor Segovia Pinto, who wrote up a report noting the presence of an extensive amount of archaeological material. But instead of excavating the site and removing the ancient treasures for analysis, Segovia instructed the local farmers to seal up the entrance, and all records of the contents of the cave seemed to vanish. He never spoke of his discovery again. So what was uncovered in the caves of Balamku that the authorities were so keen to remain a secret? The answer to that is unlikely to be forthcoming, as investigators have said that they have only just begun to unearth this collection of Mayan artifacts. They advise that the site could take years to study due to the sheer number of richly decorated items on offer. However, they're confident that the knowledge they will gain from the contents within the Balamku will profoundly change their ideas about the civilization that once dominated Central America. Around the year 900 BC, something new emerged out of the deep jungles and wilderness of what is now Guatemala and southern Mexico: the Mayan civilization. They were once one of the most advanced societies on Earth. The Mayans developed a written language long before any other culture in North America, and were known to have sophisticated mathematical, astronomical, and calendar systems. For the next 2,000 years, the Mayan civilization flourished at an astounding rate. They built huge and sprawling capitals, invested in farming and in trade, and became the most dominant force in the region, occupying an area from Mexico to El Salvador. They erected large temples and pyramids, creating huge cities supporting ever-increasing numbers of people. The population soared, with some estimates suggesting that at one time there were as many as 22 million Mayans, almost a quarter of the Earth's population at that time. During this period, the Mayans developed sophisticated forms of artwork and produced a great variety of architectural wonders, leaving a legacy which places them amongst the greatest civilizations of the pre-industrial age. And then suddenly, without warning, this advanced population just disappeared. The great Mayan cities were deserted, the artworks discarded, and the culture abandoned. To all intents and purposes, the Mayan people simply vanished, which begs the question, what exactly could have happened to make them disappear almost overnight? Some experts think that the Maya were victims of a natural disaster, perhaps a massive earthquake or a volcanic eruption. However, the cities left behind by the Maya were intact. Whilst the ancient pyramids and temples were left to be consumed by the jungles, the buildings show no signs of any environmental catastrophe, which would explain the mass Mayan exodus. Other historians blame drought and famine. The Maya were good farmers, but as their population grew, it became harder to feed everyone. And so, the theory goes, they left their cities behind in search of food. Alternative research suggests that the Maya destroyed themselves, perhaps through civil war. But there are no records of such a conflict in the records they left behind, nor any explanation of why they left the region so abruptly. However, the mystery of the Mayans' demise is superseded only by the riddle of exactly where they originated from. For years, Mayan researchers have adhered to one of two theories. Some argue that the pre-Columbian culture developed virtually on its own, emerging fully formed from the depths of the jungle. Others believe they developed from other smaller civilizations in Central America at the time. However, neither explanation would explain how the Mayan were able to advance and progress so quickly. For years, archaeologists have been unable to determine how the Mayan became so much more skilled than their contemporary civilizations, particularly in mathematics, engineering, and most importantly, astronomy. Could the answer be that they had help from an extraterrestrial source? Throughout Mayan history, its rulers often claim to be descended from the stars, and numerous artifacts have been found which appear to depict alien beings and spacemen. In addition, the carvings upon one ancient ruler's tomb seem to illustrate the king within the cockpit of a spaceship, and inscriptions depict in detail his journey across the Milky Way. Whilst many mainstream historians have ruled out any connection to alien visitation, it remains a fact that in many areas across Central and South America, ancient markings, such as the Nazca lines in Peru, remain unexplained, and can only be seen in their entirety from several hundred feet above the Earth. Is this evidence that our ancient ancestors had access to flying machines? A number of researchers believe that the Mayans' huge temples, aligned with solar and lunar activity, were in fact some sort of ancient landing pads for spaceships, or a way of communicating with beings on other planets. It's interesting that the building of pyramids across the world, including in ancient Egypt, India, and China, seem to have occurred at roughly the same time, despite these civilizations having no contact with one another. And despite the building of pyramids being viewed as a predominantly Egyptian pastime, the Mayan built 10 times the number of pyramids that have been found in Egypt. Is it merely a coincidence that these disparate cultures all suddenly decided to start erecting huge monoliths and pyramids following the same constellations at exactly the same point in history? And why did these ancient societies appear to have such in-depth understanding of the solar system, including planets that would not be discovered for another 1,000 years? In 2012, a Mexican official released some never-before-seen Mayan artifacts, including statues, masks, plaques, and documents found in the inner networks of a temple in Mexico. And incredibly, he claimed that these artifacts confirmed without question that the Maya had contact with extraterrestrials. Even more astonishing, the official suggested that more evidence of aliens making contact with the Mayans existed within writing and codices found by historians, but that these are being suppressed by figures high up in the government. In recent years, hieroglyphs have been decoded to reveal that the Maya were able to accurately predict shifts in the Earth's axis every 26,000 years, and the ancient people believed that their rulers were direct descendants of beings from another world. Every Mayan city shows signs of astronomical influences in their construction. Recently translated codices have revealed the extent of the Mayans' understanding of the movement of the stars and archaeologists have identified that many of the most important and symbolic Mayan buildings were aligned with planets or with the sun's transit. Indeed, several of the largest structures were observatories that had special windows inset into the walls, and each window corresponded to a specific celestial event. Interestingly, this adherence to the movements of the planets can also be seen in all the other great civilizations, including ancient Egypt, China, and the Celtics. But why were the Mayans observing the cosmos so intensely, and what exactly were they looking for? The earliest records of Mayan mythology tell stories of how the gods came down from the heavens to a barren and lifeless planet Earth. Here they created man, and the gods shared their sacred powers with early humans. However, they soon realized that they did not want to make man more powerful than themselves, and the gods stripped humans of these special gifts and made them mortal. One of the most important gods to the ancient Mayans was the serpent god Kukulkan. Legend tells that whilst he was sometimes a snake, Kukulkan could transform himself into a tall, blue-eyed white man with long hair who taught the Mayans the fundamentals of agriculture, science, and medicine. Having taught the Mayans all he knew, this man, who was almost European in his appearance, returned to the stars, leaving a prophecy that one day he would return. Could this explain the Mayans' obsession with all things celestial? Were they waiting for signs of their sacred god's return? Fascinatingly, the recently unearthed cave of Balamku lies close to the site of the famed pyramid built to worship Kukulkan, and stories are already circulating about what is depicted on the newly discovered relics found within. Prominent astrophysicists argue that while many legends, artifacts, and purported out-of-place relics are cited in support of the ancient aliens idea, very few require more than a passing mention and can be easily explained. Yet, despite this, evidence of ancient cultures being visited by aliens continues to be unearthed around the world. Ancient cave drawings found in the Sahara appear to show beings wearing helmets and oxygen masks. In locations as disparate as Peru and the Italian Alps, archaeologists have observed ancient images of beings that seem to fly and creatures in what appear to be spaceships. Whilst the idea that aliens have visited our planet and that they communicated with our ancestors to teach them advanced technology has been dismissed by many historians, they haven't been able to provide an alternative logical answer for these bizarre images, and these experts have an even harder time explaining away the construction of awe-inspiring monuments that speckle the landscape of the globe. Earth is the home to dozens of incredible ancient constructions which have left modern scientists, historians, and engineers scratching their heads. These experts are unable to explain how ancient humans could have built gigantic and intricate structures without the use of cutting-edge crane and cutting technology. Some of the monuments, such as the famous pyramids and temples of the Mayans, are so intricate and complex that experts in the field of engineering are unable to replicate them using the most modern methods humanity has to offer. So could the truth about alien contact with the ancient Mayans finally be found amongst the newly unearthed treasures in the caves and tunnels of Balamku? The contents of the cave have lain undisturbed for over a millennia, and no reason has ever been given as to why the site was sealed up over 50 years after this amazing treasure trove of artifacts was discovered. So, if further evidence of the Mayans' contact with extraterrestrials is revealed, could it finally convince the experts that aliens not only visited our ancient ancestors, but were also responsible for our very creation? The official version says that the archaeologist Klaus Schmidt found Göbekli Tepe in 1994 under a mound, discovering one of the greatest mysteries of traditional archaeology. So let's go back to the beginning. A farmer who belonged to the lands located about 15 kilometers from the city of Sanliurfa, ancient city of Edessa, southeast of Turkey. He found, while carrying animals to graze on a hill of his property, some very smooth stones, polished. A group of archaeologists back in 1963 started digging the hill. since it didn't seem natural that they found some flint axes and ceramics, dating them in the Byzantine period, maybe a cemetery, and that's it. So we wonder, why did they abandon an archaeological site simply because it was Byzantine? We're not clear about the real reason for abandonment, but for now, let's continue with the official story. In 1994, the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began digging the place. Sure thing, there was something more than a Byzantine cemetery. The first thing discovered by the fragments found that this was an important prehistoric site. Later, he was able to date the settlement to about 11,500 years, making it the oldest archaeological human settlement in the world registered to date. Surprisingly, the whole settlement was deliberately buried around 8000 BC, then the locals used the mound as a grazing site, removing rocks and stacking them elsewhere and destroying, surely, part of the archaeological evidence, and that was destroyed in the movement of the rocks. Now, with only this paragraph, we find the first questions. Who built Göbekli Tepe? With what purpose did they build it? Why, after building it 3,000 years later, did they bury it? Continuing with the investigations, we'll continue looking into the story to reveal some unknowns. What is in Göbekli Tepe? When Schmidt arrived, he found a mound. Scattered all over the place, he found pieces of ceramics and flint, with which he began to date the place. When beginning to dig in those smooth rocks that the farmer had found, he discovered that these were immense. He kept digging and digging. We'll avoid everything possible, fall into the nerd zone, but there are things that must be said to understand this archaeological site. First, there are different layers called strata. The last one is the current one. The next one will be the layers of the farmers of 100 or 200 years ago, with decaying roots and animals, of the shepherds that took their animals to graze that hill. And so we can continue peeling layers. Of course, these layers represent years, hundreds of years, even thousands of years. The strata are named after periods, and here we'll talk about some of them. The stratigraphic sequence, that is, all those layers we're talking about, numbered and named by archaeologists, suggest several millennia of activity, reaching the Mesolithic. Yes, we continue in the nerd zone, but wait, it will be understood what we mean. The Mesolithic period, where man stopped praying, hunting and collecting basically, to start sowing and harvesting and raising cattle. In this period, it's more than certain that in addition to agriculture and livestock, the man began to think about other things, look at the stars and think that there's something else besides the sun and the clouds and the moon. Surely he began to think of a higher self, and that's how religions are born. But before going back to the religions and those kind of things, let's continue in Göbekli Tepe. Schmidt continued digging, like we said, until discovering some pillars of about 6 meters interlaced with lower walls, with circular and ovoid structures, which are in stratum 3, belonging to the pre-ceramic Neolithic 9000 BC period. The monoliths have animal carvings and abstract pictograms. They seem to be sacred symbols very similar to those that are usually seen painted in Neolithic caves. Only that here are detailed carvings really well made. They represent lions, bulls, wild boars, foxes, gazelles, donkeys, snakes and other reptiles, insects, arachnids and birds, especially vultures and waterfowl. Presumably the surroundings of the sanctuary housed a great variety of fauna and flora and represented the animals they saw. But not only animals are represented in the Göbekli Tepe. The taller T-shaped columns have anthropomorphic carvings, which represent their superior beings or gods. These are erect, with their arms at their sides. It's striking that some of them show a kind of bracelet on one of their wrists, which is very reminiscent of a watch. Did you have a watch 11,500 years ago? In addition, one of the carvings represents a woman crouched down who Schmidt calls Venus Accueillant. In stratum 2, from the pre-ceramic Neolithic B, 7,500 to 6,000 BC, some rectangular rooms were found with paved pavements similar to those used in ancient Rome. According to Schmidt, Göbekli Tepe is the first religious sanctuary of humanity, since with 11,500 years, there is no indication anywhere in the world of something similar. According to Schmidt, this complex had a rather special feature. Once they finished a temple, they buried it and began to build another one. Schmidt believes that the discovery of Göbekli Tepe changes our understanding of the development of the Neolithic. Faced with the conventional thesis that the invention of agriculture led to a sedentary way of life, Schmidt believes that in the case of the Göbekli Tepe, the engine of change was religion. And it's not a random thought. It was groups of hunter-gatherers who began to settle in the area to store and defend their food sources in order to provide the temple, which was already being built. It's a very interesting theory because to date it's believed that agriculture and grazing generated the settlement of the human being and consequently religions. In Göbekli Tepe there are no signs of agriculture, if grazing, but it is after the temple if we must be sincere. In case this postulated theory were taken for granted, it would make us think and reflect about the whole theological history until now. So, were the religions that created the human settlements or vice versa? However, scholars like Ted Banning have questioned whether Göbekli Tepe was exclusively a religious center and not a settlement, as well that its builders were hunter-gatherers, since small mills and flint sickles have been found, typical of farmers. But if we think about it, perhaps the religious temple generated the settlement. This need to hunt and gather first and then plant and harvest to feed the people who came to the temple and or who live nearby. Let's think about that. Currently, many churches receive thousands of faithful, and in some cases they even serve hot food in times of cold extremes. And we couldn't help thinking that Göbekli Tepe might have done something similar. But regardless of whether the temple generated the settlement or the settlement generated the temple, we mustn't forget the type of construction. As in places like Stonehenge, we are faced with large stones of several tons that were moved and placed with precision on top of each other, with perfect joints in each case. Many of them, as we have seen, were carved with figures of animals and anthropomorphic characters, with watches, belts and buckles, etc., which are more of a sign of our modernity than of the era in which they were carved. These carvings in particular are very similar and almost identical to certain bas-reliefs found in the excavations in Babylon, where the Assyrian and Babylonian gods, the Anunnaki, carry strange little bags and relics on their wrists. In these watches, or in some of them, the dial is divided into 13 hours and not 12, as in modern watches. Anyway, Göbekli Tepe is one of the most mysterious religious temples, besides the oldest, because beyond what we all know for what temples are used, the main question are why? Why and how did they build it? Let's assume for a second that the place was chosen at random. We know that many places where a temple or megalithic construction is settled present certain aspects that make them paranormal hotspots. So why choose that place at random? Well, the simple answer is they didn't. The shape of the temples is a separate issue. The circular shape is almost classical in ancient civilizations. In Africa, for example, we have found the remains of a civilization that built circular walls, also in America and Oceania. So, if we assume that all religious traditions have a single source, we mustn't deny that, for example, there are pyramids all over the world, that in all traditions there are winged men who are able to fly, and that all traditions, all, have their stories in beings that came down from heaven, among them many other coincidences. It's evident that the circular form was adopted by various peoples of the world. But there is more. Just as many of the constructions present astronomical alignments, that is, they align with some celestial bodies. Göbekli Tepe is no exception. According to the archaeologist astronomer Guido Magli, this temple could have been built as an observatory and as a place of worship for the star Sirius. Sirius, also known as the Star of the Dog, in the constellation of Canis Major, is the brightest star in the sky and has been worshipped by numerous civilizations. The Egyptians even based one of their calendars on this star that coincided with the rise of the waters of the Nile. It's also from this relationship that we have the so-called Days of Dog Days, a word that refers to this star. To all this, we must add the possibility that the oldest civilization in leaving archaeological traces of a religion could have based the oldest temple we know in the cult of Sirius. If we ask ourselves, why Sirius? The answer is more than obvious. So many cultures with so many kilometers between them cannot be wrong. It is evident that they pay tribute to a star from which the gods arrived. And there we have a why. We need to get into the how. They are gigantic rocks that were transported from the top of the mountain, carved, polished and sculpted, and perfectly placed in their place in a perfect alignment with Sirius, as we've said. How did they move and place them? We don't have any information about that, but what we do know, in other written traditions, architects and builders have devices that rock the stones. These traditions from places as distant as Egypt or Easter Island are without doubt almost identical. We can already put together the story of Göbekli Tepe. About 12,000 years ago, beings arrived from the cosmos and settled in the area near the current Turkish city of Şanlıurfa. The reason? We presume that the area is a hotspot of magnetic energy, necessary perhaps to move their ships. The ancient inhabitants of the area saw large ships descending, and descending from it, aliens with their wonderful contraptions, such as wristwatches, tablet-like devices, intercoms and so on, which left them in awe. After the possible initial fear, the aliens communicated with the inhabitants, showing their celestial apparatus. After a while, the ETs left the place and the inhabitants, before the promise of these to return, decided to build in the place of the landing a temple where to call the gods. Presumably, some of the ETs stayed and helped with their celestial machines, anti-gravity devices for example, to raise the large slabs and place them in the chosen places. The question of why the ETs who stayed behind helped to build temples of worship to their extraterrestrial companions is a mystery. Simply prehistoric humans could not move slabs of 3, 4 or 9 tons without help. Let's think that currently large machines can move rocks and objects of several tons, but this happens relatively recently, just a few years ago. As always, maybe what we can tell you here can be classified as madness, but there's a lot of evidence that tells us that we're not wrong. The great slabs, the perfect alignment with Sirius, the carvings of humans with clocks, the facts that the complex is formed with 4 different temples, probably with different alignments, which we'll discover with the passage of time, that were covered with earth to build upon, and makes us think that Göbekli Tepe was not built by the aliens, but that they helped humans to build it, to record their passage through our planet as they did in hundreds of places around the world. Researchers in Turkey are about to embark on an excavation at the ancient site of Karahan Tepe, and they believe it's much older than Göbekli Tepe, the famous 0 point of world history. If you were to ask any professor of history or even a self-respecting armchair archaeologist to name the oldest monument ever discovered, they would have all said Göbekli Tepe. But now, that answer might be Karahan Tepe, and this is creating a lot of excitement in archaeological circles. Karahan Tepe is said to be much older than Göbekli Tepe. Archaeologists have been working at the Karahan Tepe site, which is often called the sister site of Göbekli Tepe, since 1997. The site is located near Yagmulu and roughly 35 kilometers east of the 12,000-year-old Göbekli Tepe site. Over the years, archaeologists have made a series of amazing discoveries at the Karahan Tepe site. In particular, tons of buried T-shaped obelisks, similar to the ones carved with wild animals at Göbekli Tepe, have led researchers to conclude that Karahan Tepe is much older than its younger sister, Göbekli Tepe. Head of excavations at Karahan Tepe, Dr. Nesmi Karul, said that 12 spots estimated to be in the same period as Göbekli Tepe are now known in the region, one of which is the Karahan Tepe. Speaking at the 10th International Resort Tourism Congress, Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy said that an intensive and rapid excavation program continues in Karahan Tepe, which to date has yielded 250 obelisks featuring animal figures. Ersoy claims that planned excavations will prove the settlement at Karahan Tepe will be much older than the 12,000-year-old Göbekli Tepe. A 2016 National Geographic article recounted the fascinating story of the discovery and preservation of Göbekli Tepe. Professor Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist who led excavations at the site, argued before he died in 2014 that a vast labor force needed to build the enclosures, and that this construction project pushed people to develop agriculture as a way of providing predictable food and perhaps drink for workers. At the 2015 World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Turkey's Doğuş Group announced that they plan to spend $15 million over the next 20 years in partnership with the National Geographic Society on the Göbekli Tepe site. And Doğuş Group chairman Ferit İhsanek said in a press release that the reason so much cash was being spent on Göbekli Tepe was because this prehistoric temple was the 0 point in time. Karahan Tepe may well be Göbekli Tepe's older sister. While Göbekli Tepe holds the world record in media headlines and elsewhere as the earliest temple of its type ever discovered, there are several other contenders for this crown in Turkey. According to Jens Nottroff, an archaeologist at the German Archaeological Institute who is working on Göbekli Tepe site, smaller versions of the pillars, symbols and architecture carved into stone at Göbekli Tepe have been found in settlements up to 125 miles away, including Karahan Tepe. Professor Nottroff told National Geographic that Göbekli Tepe probably served the region as a cathedral, and therefore the surrounding sacred sites were like parish churches. The scientist also thinks hunter-gatherers traveled long distances to meet, worship, and help build new monumental structures through vast community projects that included grand feasts to display wealth. Returning to Karahan Tepe, according to a report in Daily Sabah, many more years of excavations and research must be conducted to determine what exactly it was used for. However, while it does happen, scientists seldom make big claims without equally big proof. And in this instance, the researchers think that when they ultimately get to Karahan Tepe's excavation center, it will be much older than 12,000 years. The archaeologists at Karahan Tepe are also convinced that they have a new 0 point in world history. The mayor says the site will become a priority in place of Göbekli Tepe, and it will become a new focus of national, archaeological and tourist attention. Karahan Tepe is the sister to the enigmatic Göbekli Tepe that sits around 23 miles southeast of Göbekli upon an elevated limestone ridge. It has many striking similarities to Göbekli. Firstly, it consists of T-shaped pillars, 266 of them that mostly form parallel rows. The pillars have relief carvings, and the site appears, like Göbekli, to be deliberately buried under a great artificial mound, although this could be natural, as after 10,500 years of accumulation of dirt, combined with high winds, could have covered it back up. The comparisons do not end there. It also has serpent relief carvings, strange rock indentations, large cut marks, porthole stones, and an unfinished T-shaped pillar still in the quarry, the focus of this article. Karahan Tepe was first discovered in 1997 and was surveyed in 2000 and again in 2011. Like Göbekli Tepe, it's located within the boundaries of Sanlifura, ancient Edessa, the birthplace of Abraham, around 30 miles from the city. It's not an officially recognized tourist site, so they had to plan their trip carefully as it was on private land upon the Tek Mountains. Fortunately, a well-placed, probably modern standing stone marked the entrance to the track that led to the farm that is located behind. When Andrew Collins visited there in 2004, the person who showed him around was warned he would get a beating if they found anyone had visited there. 10 years later, and the owners welcomed the occasional visitor with tea and information. No beatings entailed, just sweet hot beverages and conversation after the morning visit. The dating of the site is impressive, as it's dated to 8,500 BC, contemporary with the now submerged Navali Quarry and the later stages of Göbekli Tepe. There are obvious similarities to these and other sites in the vicinity, but we've heard that there was a quarry on site where an unfinished T-shaped pillar still sits within the bedrock. Kevin Fish diligently searched for it with only one clue, that it was directly to the west of the main enclosure, as mentioned in the 2011 report. Kevin eventually converged at the impressive monolith. It lies on a rock face sloping 30 degrees towards the setting sun. At 18 feet long, it would have probably been the largest monolith at the site. The site is not excavated yet, so this can't be confirmed, and weighs in at around 30 to 40 tons. Its downward angle on the slope on a natural exposed rock face may have been why this was a preferred spot to quarry from. As archaeologist Bahattin Selik explains, this is quite a practical technique, with roughly chiseling on the side of the rock to produce a T-shape, whilst carving the other side 40 centimeters wide and 1 meter deep. The solid pillar separated from the bedrock with this technique and can easily be removed from the quarry with the help of a slope. Andrew Collins decided to measure it and discovered it was indeed 18 feet, 5.5 meters in length, with a maximum width of 6.6 feet, 2 meters, across its T-shaped head. This is similar in size to the twin monoliths at the center of Göbekli's enclosure, C and D. The weathering was very bad, much like the exposed parts of the pillars on the main hill. However, what lies underneath could be as well preserved as Göbekli Tepe. Altogether, Karahan Tepe is a fascinating site that begs excavation, as the significance of the nearby Göbekli Tepe has now hit the headlines. After leaving the site, the visitor wondered if the location of the choice of rock was significant. Was the direction of the quarry from the main temple an indication of a tradition that existed as far back as 10,500 years ago? Andrew Collins discussed the possibility that, indeed, it could be the case, as bringing quarried stone from the west to the east may represent bringing it into the light, sunrise, from darkness, the sunset. However, the remaining 14-foot pillar still on the eastern slope had further avenues slightly further east of it, so again it showed a possible west to east movement. Alternatively, it could also represent an east to west direction from the smaller quarry to the main enclosure. After searching through some Masonic texts, a reference was found to a ceremony where the initiate had to move in that direction, east to west. Why this is perhaps could represent facing one's own death, as initiation rites such as these are often about facing deep-rooted fears. Whether this was on the minds of the builders of Karahan Tepe, we'll never know, unless of course the site gets excavated and evidence emerges. From now, we can only speculate. Another aspect that grabbed Andrew's attention was the fact that the parallel rows appeared to be serpent-like, weaving up or down the main hill or from the main enclosure. In his initial report, Andrew stated, "It's even possible that these zigzagging pairs of stones making up the stone avenues located on the northern, eastern sides of the tepe signify the path of snakes, which are seen to descend like living energy into the valley below." This idea is given credence through the fact that carving on the stone seems directed up the hill, as if the direction of movement is downwards through the various sets of gateways. After coming to this conclusion, Andrew dreamt of snakes, their tails tied together, each one trying to break free of its bondage, all of them writhing about in the process. With this dream came the impression that the snakes represented the containment, flow, and energy of the stone's avenues at Karahan Tepe, an interesting concept if nothing else. Earth energy springs to mind, as it has been found in Avebury, Brittany and Cornwall that stone avenues mark the path of telluric earth energy currents, with a crossing point often at the centre of the complex, which would naturally congregate on a hilltop. More research needs to be carried out to confirm this hypothesis, but with the serpent symbolism at such a remote site, it could even reveal the origins of geomancy and earth energy science. When they go back in September, they will have some equipment to take readings and dowsing rods to find out if this is the case.
The Indian subcontinent is surrounded by the Indian Ocean on its lower shores, whilst to the mountainous north it borders with Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal and Pakistan. It's home to over 1.3 billion people, but the most amazing figures are reserved for their gods. Hinduism holds a leading share in the faiths practiced on this land, with more than 79% of Indians identifying as Hindus. The number of gods is equally mind-blowing, with 33 billion individual deities, each baying for worship and adoration. With 966 million Hindus in the country, trying to reach an audience with a particular god among billions may be challenging, especially when we consider there are only 2 million Hindu temples throughout India. If you picture this in your mind, it would be similar to trying to have a quiet, intimate lunch with your partner on the floor of the stock exchange. Busy would be an understatement. The costs of running a temple, just like running a church in Europe, can be challenging. Money is not always forthcoming, but a temple located in Thiruvananthapuram, the state capital of Kerala on the southeastern coast, does not possess such a restriction in its finances. The temple not only housed one of the largest treasures ever discovered, but also possesses a doorway guarded by giant ornate serpents. A doorway made of iron that, if opened, may lead to the absolute destruction of the human race and this planet. Padmanabhaswamy Temple is a place of history and breathtakingly gold-plated glory. It came into existence in 500 BC, where we will find it mentioned in several ancient texts, which is a special place of worship. Sitting on the outer edges of a largely positively charged magnetic anomaly, it shares a lot of symbolism with Neolithic serpent worship, which also contained portals to other worlds, guarded by giant serpents. The temple features heavily in literature, especially with the Sangan Tamil literature and poetry, where it is often depicted as having once been a wondrous place full of vast riches and with walls crafted from gold. Yet in addition to its magnificent splendour, it is also a place of great mystery. Much of the complex is out of bounds and has been kept secret from the outside world for hundreds of years. In 2011 it was announced that a hidden treasure vault had been discovered beyond the already well-documented Vault B, deep inside the temple. Adding to recent treasure findings in several other vaults, the researchers are estimated it could be worth over $1 trillion. But that is where the problem started. Nobody wants to dare open the hidden inner sanctum, that place beyond the iron doors, the place guarded by giant iron serpents, warning those that wish to enter, or worse still, trying to warn us of the dangers if it were opened. An expert panel inventorying assets of the temple has approached the Apex Court for permission to open the vault, as per a report in Hindustan Times. The report also added that the Travancore royal family, along with a section of devotees and the shrine's administration, opposed the opening of the B vault, but may lose their fight in an expected Supreme Court ruling. What has not been acknowledged by the Indian court is the existence of a hidden inner chamber beyond Vault B. This chamber is historically told to have thick walls made of solid gold, and it is where the mystery really exists, and could contain the largest undiscovered treasure find in the history of the world. The secretive Indian royal family of Travancore have forbidden the Vault B to be opened. The media, however, have watched every single development. Much speculation swirled at the time as to what would be discovered within, with ideas ranging from finding mere dust and bones to unfathomable riches. The previous vaults had been constructed in such a way that it took modern crews great effort and care to peel the doors back to see inside the vaults. There, glittering in the murk, were jewels, coins, gold and silver bars, solid gold idols and figurines, diamonds, gemstone-encrusted artifacts, and ceremonial garb, ornate jewellery, over £2,000 of gold coins, and a massive gem and diamond studded golden throne. Other vaults in the temple would prove to be equally as hard to open, yet all bursting with mind-boggling amounts of lost treasure. The loot was eventually catalogued from the vaults, all thought to be the result of the accumulation of thousands of years of donations and gifts to the temple and its deity from kings and dynasties across the land. Yet for all of this amazing wealth uncovered, although 5 of the vaults were opened, one remained stubbornly resistant to all efforts to disgorge its secrets. But why this temple? What made this place on the edge of a magnetic anomaly in the southwest region of India so special that it would hide in its vaults a vast fortune and not be used for maintenance or running costs? Effectively, the gold and jewels were dead, worthless and less utilised. But when we consider the serpent connection, we see another pattern of treasure being guarded by reptiles. Vault B, also called Parat Akonkalara, is unique compared with the others. It is thought to be a holy repository closely associated with the deity Vishnu, and with an exceptionally sturdy solid iron door lacking any nuts, bolts, locks, knobs or latches, and adorned with the image of 2 gigantic cobras on each side, denoting it as a special and sacred place indeed, and it is not even included in the official temple inventory. Initial efforts to open Vault B met with failure, and indeed its secrets remain sealed. According to legend, opening that door could very well unleash a catastrophic flood that would inundate all of Kerala, and that it is best left untouched. In every one of the warnings against opening the doors we have curses, misfortune, death, cataclysm and deadly snakes. But while these may just be legends, the fact remains that Vault B has never been opened. Padmanabhaswamy Temple keeps its ancient enigmas buried within Vault B, and it is one of the most heavily guarded and monitored places on the planet. Here, heavily armed guards and the state-of-the-art surveillance equipment keep watch on it and the other vaults. Despite the security, it is estimated that millions of dollars worth of treasure have disappeared from here since it was made known to the outside world, and it is even believed that Vault B may have very well been raided in past eras through some as yet undiscovered subterranean tunnel. Some tests speak of being able to open the door. The secret vault can be opened by a highly erudite sadhus or mantrikas who are familiar with the knowledge of extricating Naga Bandham or Naga Pasam by chanting a Garuda mantra. So except in this way the door can't be opened by any means by anyone. Such a highly sacred and powerful yogis or mantrikas who does know how to execute highly sacred Garuda mantra no longer exists. If any human attempts are made with man-made technology to open the mysterious Chamber B other than by chanting highly sacred and powerful Garuda mantras by a highly sacred sadhus or mantrikas, catastrophes are likely to occur in and around the temple premises or throughout India or even throughout the world, according to Vedic astrologers of India, who also revealed their inability to open the door by chanting the secret Garuda mantra. The chanting of the Garuda mantra has many benefits. Not only does it remove the fear of poisonous reptiles and snakes, whilst chanting the mantra you have spirituality. It will help to remove all ailments along with diseases like viral fever and even poisonous bites which may fall to those that try to open Vault B. It is also said that Garuda mantra is able to eliminate black magic, evil eyes and also negative energies. It is said to be believed that cancer and tumours are caused by curses of snakes. It is therefore advisable for those who are diagnosed with these types of illnesses to pray to Lord Garuda for relief. So if we take a look more closely at Hinduism, praying to Lord Garuda before Lord Vishnu is said to speed up the prayers along with the effects. Lord Garuda can be worshipped, which can also increase the confidence and courage in you and also take away all kinds of fears. It is highly unlikely that Vault B was opened after the 1880s. The courts will make the final decision on the future of Vault B. A representative of the Travancore royal family said, "It is a sacred and secret place. It is said that there is a passage from this Vault B that leads to the Sri Cavil, or Sanctum Sanctorum. Why should it be exposed to the public? And we have heard so many stories about the consequences of opening it."
The mysterious site of Abu Ghurab, Egypt, was a sun temple and a funerary complex. Indeed, the site contains the only complete sun temple ever discovered. But according to some researchers, there are more mysteries to be discovered at Abu Ghurab. They insist that heavy blocks used to build some monuments at the site could only have been levitated into position using ancient advanced technology involving acoustic waves, a technique which has since been lost. It's generally believed by Egyptologists that the Egyptian cult temple of the Old Kingdom were based on the cult of the sun god Re at Heliopolis, which meant that they were probably open in plan and lacking a shrine. Sun temples were unique among the ancient Egypt cult temples, as worship was centered on a cult object, the benben, a short obelisk placed in full sunlight. The benben was the name of the divine stone at Heliopolis, associated with an old Egyptian verb which meant to rise. According to the pyramid texts from the Old Kingdom, this stone was a manifestation of the primeval god Atum, when he rose out of the primeval waters of Nun. According to another interpretation, it represented the primeval hill on which Atum first landed. The stone itself was conical in shape, was kept in the innermost sanctuary of the House of Re in Heliopolis, called the House of the Benben. The building of the sun temples was the result of a gradual rise in the importance of the sun god. During the Old Kingdom, Ra became essentially a state deity. Among the few temples surviving from the Old Kingdom are sun temples of the 5th dynasty kings at Abu Ghurab. Abu Ghurab, Arabic for Father of Ravens, is an ancient Egyptian site about a mile north of Abu Sir, between Saqqara and Al-Jiza, and 6 miles southwest of Cairo. The site is known as the location of 2 5th dynasty sun temples, circa 2465 to 2325 BC. The first part of the 5th dynasty is associated with a remarkably strong emphasis on the worship of the sun god Re. Contemporary inscriptions record that 6 sun temples were built on the site in that period. However, only those of King Urusaph and King Neosea have been found excavated. Neosea, or Neosera, meaning possessed of Re's power, was the 6th king of the 5th dynasty, and his sun temple was better preserved of the two as it was constructed entirely of stone. Years before, the purpose of Neosea's structure was known, a pyramid of Riga, by travelers who visited there. This description is perhaps not too far wide of the mark, as Neosea constructed a pyramid, mortuary complex, and a valley temple at the site. The Sun Temple at Abu Ghurab is one of only 2 Kingdom Sun temples known to have survived, although it's believed that many others existed and were destroyed, fell into ruin, or have not been discovered yet. The temple consisted of a large courtyard constructed on the edge of the desert, surrounded by storerooms, cult chambers, and an altar. The upper temple included a 60-foot high pedestal supporting a 108-foot obelisk, a symbol of the sun god. An altar was built to the east, directly in front of the obelisk in the court, open to the sun. This altar was constructed of 5 huge white alabaster blocks, which were arranged to form a symbol meaning Ra is satisfied. A long covered passage approached the platform from the Nile River Valley and was decorated with beautifully sculptured and painted scenes from the Old Kingdom around 2575 to 2130 BC. The hill on which Neosea's temple with the obelisk stood was relatively small, and the summit had been extended before the temple's construction with a system of artificial terraces. The temple itself has a rectangular layout with an east-west orientation defined by an enormous periphery wall built of limestone rocks. About a quarter of the temple was taken up by the large open court located in the southeastern area, while the northeastern quarter consisted of a series of storage chambers and an open space, referred to by Ludwig Borchardt, who excavated the site in 1898 and 1901 as the Great Slaughterhouse. German Egyptologist and architect Borchardt became famous for his excavations in Abu Ghurab and also at Amarna, where he discovered the famous bust of Nefertiti. He christened the area the Great Slaughterhouse due to the fact that he discovered a number of large alabaster basins here. These objects were circular bowls, about 3.9 feet in diameter, carved out of roughly cubed blocks, which were positioned one after another in such a way that the blood of sacrificed animals could flow freely down them. However, there is another more extreme theory as to what the 9 circular alabaster basins were used for. One or two researchers have suggested that they may have been used to levitate objects through the vibrational manipulations of water. The proposal, among various extreme theories regarding the pyramids, was put forward in the 2009 series The Pyramid Code by Dr. Carmen Bolter. She says regarding pyramids around the world, "It seems that there was some kind of worldwide pyramid building effort over tens of thousands of years because they're not all the same style, and there are some modern ones, more modern, relatively more modern. So I think we're saying that we're looking for Atlantis and everything that went into it, then all the pyramids on the planet become relevant." In the documentary, we're introduced to an Egyptian tour guide and writer who says, in 1936, 1937, the Sphinx was covered up to the neck in sand. This was my playground. There were tunnels I used to walk and even crawl in sometimes because it's narrow. At Abu Ghurab, we have a crystal altar, a round disc in the middle of 4 radial lines, a symbol of Hotep, and the word Hotep means peace and food. This round disc is a lid on a shaft about 180 feet deep to the level of the ocean, and there's still running water in there, and you can feel it while you're in the area. These giant concave quartz instruments were not found in a line like you see them today. 9 of them were found around the area, and there's still more to be found. And then we have the oldest obelisk created in Egypt. Next to that altar, what's left of the hieroglyph writing. That is Sufi writing at the obelisk, depicting the disk of the sun, the words saying the heart of the sun, Ibra. Adherents of such theories point out that the view of the basins from above reflects the ancient Sanskrit mandala of a circle within a square, while the carefully machined circular concavities suggest a complex mechanical purpose that has not yet been identified by modern Egyptologists or any independent researchers. According to researcher Alex Putney, Putney goes on to say regarding the alabaster basins, "The identical dimensions and curvature of the many stone basins, with perfectly rendered geometric forms, gives the appearance of having been serially manufactured through mold-making processes rather than being quarried and carved in a solid state. Abundant evidence of this fact has been ignored for close to 30 years by much of the academic community, despite publication in scientific journals." The makeup of the stone basins at Abu Ghurab and the stone used in the construction of the pyramids of Giza suggest to Putney that levitation techniques were being employed in ancient Egypt. The specific and exclusive use of piezoelectric calcite and quartz crystals for the construction of the pyramids themselves, and the large basins that once surrounded them in great numbers, relates to their transducive capacity to focus and amplify acoustic waves. Mechanical flexing occurs in the quartz and calcite crystals as a uniform structural deformation that generates standing waves with the stone's crystalline lattice, eventually building a strong electromagnetic field that allows acoustic levitation. Putney and others point out that there is no evidence that these basins were used in the ritual sacrifice of animals, as some academics believe. In this, at least, it seems to be correct. It is a fact that the temple has yielded no physical evidence characteristic of slaughterhouses, such as animal bones or flint knives, so it seems that rather than slaughterhouses, these spaces must have had some other use. Most Egyptologists now believe that the alabaster basins were actually used for the ritual purification of offerings, which then could have been laid out on the altar to the sun god. But for Alex Putney, such relatively simple explanations are the result of academics just not thinking big enough. He says, the hieroglyphic inscription on the obelisk at Abu Ghurab reads, Heart of the Sun, in reference to the pyramid network's piezoelectric transduction of the infrasound resonance of the sun at the 1.45 Hz frequency of the human heart at rest. Were the pyramids responsible for the regulation of global heartbeat patterns and weather patterns?